right. Hey, John here. So in this lesson, I'm gonna show you my approach to pick depth. And if you don't know what pick depth is, don't worry, I'm gonna show you exactly what everything means here. But it's a question that I get fairly often lately for whatever reason. So it must mean that a lot of people have some questions about it. So hopefully I can clear things up in this video, at least how I approach it. So pick depth just means how deep you go in between the strings when you pick. So very on the nose term, right? But why you would even care about this is because when you want to have some dynamics in your playing, meaning how hard you're gonna pick, you don't really pick harder as using more muscle when you try to get a stronger pick sound. It's more about how much of the pick you hit the string with, and that's where the pick depth comes into play. So, and I'm guessing from people's questions here is why they have issues with it is because they sort of get stuck in between the strings and they're not sure how much of the pick should they actually hit the string with. And I even got people asking like, oh, I'm at a millimeter, should I use it? And I've never approached it that way. And actually, probably because I wasn't even aware this was a term when I, started out and started building my technique. One thing that have helped me a lot when it comes to developing my technique is and sort of steer around a lot of these snags is that I've always approached it from a sound perspective. So what does it sound like when I play? Because what's the point of playing really fast if your picking sounds like shit, right? So that never made sense to me. And another thing that's helped me a lot here is that I've practiced a lot without the guitar even plugged in, right? Because then you can really hear how the attack on the string affects the tone more so than with distortion. Because with the distortion, even if you don't use any compression, I don't, but the sound gets naturally compressed by using distortion. So you don't really fully get that dynamic attack in the same way. You can't really hear what happens when you hit the string. So the best advice I can give you here, and this is going to help you with everything, not only the pick depth issue here, it's actually hard to say that for whatever reason, is to just start listening to what you're doing. And I might say like, oh yeah, of course, but I'm pretty convinced that a lot of people don't listen when they practice, because then they wouldn't sit and practice like, yeah, close to getting it now, just a few thousand more reps, doing like this and we'll be awesome in a while. That will never happen. You need to focus on the end result minus the speed, basically. Now you can't get away with any picking motion just because you're doing it slowly. That's not the point. You want to keep it as close to however you would do it when you do a speed burst, and that's a good way to find your picking motion. But that's I've covered that in a different video. But what you want to do is really listen to what you're doing. And when you do that, you're gonna probably find, and this is different for everyone, like it's gonna depend on what kind of sound you want. And I think a good example of someone that's really like using a lot of pick depth is Rick Graham when he does the economy picking. But he said he does that because since he uses economy picking, he wants to make sure that it gets really articulate, and so he kind of digs in a lot. And it clearly works great for him. But depending on what the tone you want, and I don't particularly want to have this tone for myself. So I really try to, actually I'm going to show this with a clean sound here. So there's a very clean sound using this pickup in the back here. Very dry, but you can really hear so this sounds good to me. And if I were just sitting there trying to like, oh, okay, so what's the pick depth there? I don't care. I don't give a shit, right? I'm looking for the feel of it and what it sounds like. Now, if I would, I hear a lot of people do this, and to me that doesn't sound very nice. So I think it's important that you start listening as the first thing here, and listening for, and and trying different dynamics. You can see like, okay, what would be a good default dynamic for you? Obviously you want to be able to go from, you know, very, very soft to very loud, but your default probably shouldn't be this, right? So, and the way to do this is just to find, you can start with just a note like this, and trying to find like, okay, if I pick really lightly, I like that sound, and I like this sound. So I don't like, that's not a good sound to me. I want to have it a bit more, a bit, you know, basically lighter. And physically it doesn't feel that much of a difference when I do this. A little bit, because you're kind of digging in more when you get the louder sounds, but I'm not picking harder. I'm not using more muscle per se, more so than that it's the strings have more resistance when I dig in more. But so finding this is super important, because if you have your default, then you can go, you know, up or down from there. And again, I think what you will learn most from going through these steps is listening to what does it actually sound like when I play. And you know, speed doesn't really come into it at this point. You just want to make sure that every note is even and that you like the sound. And whatever pick depth that ends up being for you, that's, you know, it is what it is. And it doesn't really matter. Because again, if you don't like the sound you're getting, but you've read somewhere that, oh, actually the pick depth should be X amount, what are you doing? You're sort of going against yourself. And like I said, I've gotten this question a lot recently, and I know a lot of people say like, oh, a lot of people ask me about my diet. No one asks you about your diet. You know, so, but I actually got this question on several videos lately, so I don't know why that is, but I thought I would address it. So, and I'm not getting very technical here, right? It's more about listening and really trying to find what's the sound that you like, and then however your pick ends up, that's how it ends up. But it can be good, like if you find that, oh, okay, it's, you know, if you look at your right hand when you actually do it, and if you find that it's difficult to keep the sound consistent, maybe you can use that as sort of a gauge to be like, okay, I shouldn't go in too much here. So you can keep track from both angles. So I think that's a very important thing to work on, and this is something you work on when you practice technique, right? So if you're practicing something, let's say you just go, that's when you should listen to what you're doing. Because just because the notes are clean and synchronized, which is super important, they can still sound crappy, right? You know, they're still clean, but it's way overblown. And what happens when you do that with a clean sound, that crappy sound doesn't go away with the distortion. It kind of almost amplifies it, and it's kind of weird because the note gets blown out in a way. It's not a nice sound. And I remember reading something that Paul Gilbert talked about when he would be sitting working on this one a lot, but he would do it like really hard and muted and sit in front of the TV and without the guitar plugged in, which I do a lot, like I said. But then when he went to rehearsal space, he noticed that like everything he played sounded crappy. And then he realized like, oh, okay, he needs to pull back on the picking dynamic to make it sound good with the amp. And a quote that that I liked was like, let the amp do the work, right? The heavy lifting. So again, it's a very personal choice. Some people pick really hard and mute a lot, and if that's the sound you're going for, that's great, because then you're pick depth is gonna be a bit deeper than the other guy. But I think the way to find the pick depth is to do it by listening. So just make sure to do that. And also, when you're working on something, really try to find like, okay, if I want to get something muted, I don't really need to hit the string super hard anyway. Sometimes maybe you want to do that, but just find like what's the optimal amount of what's the optimal dynamic here, whatever you're working on, and then go from there, instead of just, oh yeah, I'm just doing it this way always. Because a lot of these issues, like I mentioned, can be solved by listening better. From bad synchronization to pick depth, and to, whether strings start ringing or whatever, you need to use your ears. You can't just sit there and be like, play something, and then if it sounds crappy, like, yeah, it's probably gonna clean up later. No, probably not. You need to address it at some point. So by being aware of how the dynamics are actually formed on the guitar, I think that can help you a lot. So again, just sit with a single note without the guitar even plugged in, or with a clean sound, and then try to find like, just do a tremolo and try to find like, okay, what's the dynamic level that you find the most pleasing. And it can differ depending on the guitar you're playing as well. And then try to stick to that when you practice your exercises. And hopefully that will help. So any questions about that, we can go to them straight away. Hey Juan, nice to see you, man. You always say that 2 notes per string feel different, and that's why it's hard if you don't use it. Yeah, because you have less. Usually you will have I mean, if you try this with legato, 3 notes per string and then 2 notes per string, generally you're going to be using 2 fingers for 2 notes per string. So that will also feel different. So even when you do like something like that, that feels different to me than going, even though it's the same picking, because once I get into it, right? Because if I start from here, for example, so 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And if I do the same thing here, in terms of picking, so down, up, down, up, down, up. So 2 notes per string feel different, even though the picking is exactly the same. So. I feel I changed my picking a bit when I do 3 notes per string. And 2 notes per string. Especially if you do it for with a downward pick slant. Something I'm more naturally upward pick slant to. Hey James, pick that something I've been focusing on quite a lot lately. In the past, including most of my records throughout the night, so I use way too much pick that most of the time. Yeah, I don't know if you saw the beginning of the stream. Basically, the way I do it now, that's I just record a lesson at the start of the stream, and then I can cut that out and post it as a standalone video. But yeah, exactly, which led to a very aggressive sound, and that's the thing. Like, if you pick the way that you probably missed the beginning of this video, but the way that I approach this stuff, and I didn't even think about pick depth when I you know, that's a term that I've learned much later. It's just the importance of listening to what you're doing, right? Because if it sounds too aggressive for you, then you're probably picking too hard, or like too hard in this regard is like you just dig in too much. And there's a time and place for that when that's needed, but for most things, even like really, you know, hard metal stuff, if you go, the Meshuggah stuff, for example, you can't dig in too much because it's going to be very hard to keep that smooth. And again, you should let the amp do the work. Because when you get this signal into an amp, it's just not a good sound in most cases. Actually, I asked Ola about just, you know, his chugging stuff. You know, how hard he picks, and he was like, oh, quite hard, and then was like, actually not that hard. So I don't think you need to like smack the strings too much. Well, to a point, but I think after a certain threshold, it's not gonna make the sound better. And the weird thing with distortion, it kind of smashed the note, so it kind of squashes the whole thing. It sounds the note sounds bigger here. If I do this, it's kind of like gets overblown somehow. Well, Juan, I would have to see you play to be able to see what's going on. And I mean, you can do pentatonics without 2 note per string as well. So. And these feel exactly like my normal 3 note per string picking stuff. So. you know, disregard just doing things like this. My loves when I do this. So make it easy or simple. Instead of trying to go like, oh, okay. You know, trying to do all the shapes and whatever. It's a different thing when you want to just build the speed on something. And even going, you know, breaking it down to do you have my pentatonic picking power book, Juan? I go through exactly what you should practice there. So you can basically start improvising. I still will have to see you what you're doing when you practice in that regard. I can link to it here, James. Again, it's like anything else. You can just follow the routine that's in the book. I think that's super important for myself when I make any type of material, that you have an actual routine. I think that's missing in so much instructional stuff. You know, even Paul Gilbert's Intense Rock would have been so much better, even though I love that video, been so much better if he would have just said like, well, you know, put these together and do these for like X amount of time per day. This is what I did, whatever, right? That goes such a long way instead of like, oh, here's a lick. That's not very helpful. Because it's kind of like watching a fitness channel and it's like, yeah, do a deadlift, do pull-ups, do weighted pull-ups, do this, do that. But then you have no idea how much you should do, you know, in what order, you know, whatever. So, and nothing's going to help you. You're not going to get fitter by watching videos. And I think a lot of guitar players tend to do that. They buy a course, and if the course hasn't like outlined the actual practice routine for you, they kind of just look at it and be like, didn't really get much better from that course. No, it's just information on its own doesn't mean shit, right? So, even if, you know, AI turns out to be this like amazing thing where you can teach you anything and blah, 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 to learn anything, you still need to put in the work and the reps. So information doesn't mean anything if you don't actually do anything. And did you follow that schedule like to the T and very slowly as well, Juan? And also, it's quite interesting. I just found, and I posted this in the practice room, the community, if you're not aware. think all you guys in here right now are, but quote from Tom Quayle, Legato God. And he said this, once I had these exercises under my fingers, I stuck with them for around 6 months, trying not to speed up anything at all. I am firmly of the belief that if you practice slowly enough for long enough, the muscles and brain learn the required motor skills in a subconscious way, and the technique becomes easy for you. At this point, your creativity takes over and the technique has become part of your repertoire. One thing that I found is that once the technique is in place at this subconscious level, it really does feel easy, and the speed is just a byproduct of that ease. And that's, you know, exactly how I view things as well. And I know the, you know, speed it up and clean it up later crowd doesn't like to hear that, but, you know, 6 months he did super slow exercises. And I've seen him at a seminar, it's on YouTube, where he talks about basically doing something like, so just keeping everything perfect, listening, and like just amassing thousands of reps. And he said once you've done that enough, it's easy to play fast. But it sounds like something is off then, Juan, because I mean, unless you when you say slow, what do you mean? Because my idea of slow seems to be way slower than a lot of people's. Yes, I think it's a crappy concept, because if you think about it, James, how many guitar players do you know that like, I'm no, you know, I never try to do anything fast, and you know, my technique is shit. It's not a thing. How many people realistically do you think out there playing rock guitar or whatever has a technique problem because they haven't tried to play fast, you know, as many times as they need to? Yes, you need to try to go for it as well, but that should be like a minimum amount or a minimal amount compared to the sort of mountain of slow reps. I still practice slowly. It's not because I can't play it faster, but I know that that's the only way I will improve my technique. So if the key was like, no, you just need to, you know, just try to play it fast and then you will clean it up later, then everyone would have a great technique, because that's what a lot of people do. They just try going for it and then like hope and pray that the shred god somehow will be like, oh yeah, you're worthy, you can get it now. It's so not a thing. So, and some people are like, well, you know, I did this and I did the method and that worked great for me. And, you know, I haven't really heard anyone with really good technique that say they've done it that way. But if that works for you, then you wouldn't give a shit what I say. Then also you wouldn't need my advice, because then you cracked it for yourself. And if you're doing something that's working for you, you should do that. But I think a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, they they haven't cracked it. But they still think that like, no, it has to be like, you have to, you can't practice running by walking. It's like, yeah, but it's not the same thing. It's really not the same thing when it comes to guitar. Thanks, Ian. What question is over as far as the claim someone should put forward is that the technique's not the same. Yeah, exactly. Well, I addressed that. It's not. Also, when you're walking, you don't need synchronization, do you? Right? And yes, if I play something, my technique changed a bit when I went faster, but that doesn't matter, because that's just the way it is. You're gonna have some momentum when you play faster and whatever, but it shouldn't change like wildly, like I'm doing this when I'm playing slowly and something completely different fast. But the main point and what we're working on here is the synchronization, and that's where most people fall apart. Most people have no issue doing that, right? The problem people have is coordinating everything so it sounds, you have one pick note and you have that's it. You don't get this the flams, right? That's what you want to avoid, and that's a timing issue, or like so our brain. What I found out was that when I started, I did just worked on some flamenco type playing way back, and I was like, shit, I have to, like, if I want to play that stuff, it will take me forever because I played so much with a pick, so I thought it was a completely new thing for the finger. Now, I never really got to the Paco de Lucia, level at all. Well, I mean, obviously not, but the technique, though, I found that as fast as I could play with my right hand, which wasn't very fast, I could already synchronize it well right away. I was like, huh, that's weird. But then I've also seen with like different players like Paul Gilbert, who changed his picking technique from starting like this and then changing it to this. And if the synchronization was sort of hinged upon the exact movement you did, that wouldn't have worked. He would have to redevelop his synchronization. And the same thing for me with this thing. So I'm not a neurologist, but my feeling is that whatever that you train to get this, one-to-one relationship in your synchronization, that's a sort of a timing thing between your two hands, maybe even your two, hemispheres of the brain, and it's a timing thing between those two, not necessarily, it's not so dependent on the actual movement you're doing. Let's see. Well, Yoshi, you can go for it every day. I mean, what I would do, I would practice, super boring exercises, but I knew they would help. I would play them perfectly all over the fretboard for like 2-3 hours, and then after that, I would be like, oh, let me try this. And if I fucked something up, I didn't really care because I knew that I've done so many good reps that whatever shitty reps that I would do when like playing for fun would just help me to get a feeling for like, well, what should it feel like when I play faster, right? So, and then later on learning more about all the speed burst stuff. But the speed burst stuff, I could already play fast at that point. Now, I still use speed burst stuff for just, if I have something is off somewhere, I can see like, okay, what motion do I need to do here to get it, and then slow that down, and then go back to doing the slow reps. It's just that people don't want to do the slow reps. I don't want to do that either, but I don't want to go to the gym either, but I still want to get jacked. So it's like, pick your boring, right? So I think it would be way more boring to sit there like trying to play something fast over and over and over again, and like, oh, I'm having a bit more fun because I'm actually not playing slow, and then your progress is just shit. So that's the thing for me. One thing that I would say though, that if I've been sitting there, do my practice and then I do the slow practice, I do the fast stuff and maybe improvisation or whatever, and I make mistakes and whatever, I make sure that before I put the guitar down, I play something, perfectly synchronized. Just something like that. Just so the last memory for my brain is like this perfect synchronization. I don't know if that, it really does something, but for me, it felt better than just leaving it on like some big screw up, right? James, good to hear you've confirmed that, because that has been my natural instinct as well. You literally have to be able to walk before you can run, and I acknowledge the imperfectness of that analogy. Yeah. Seb, yeah, I find it really fun when people compare sports to play an instrument. There are some parallels when it comes to technique, heavy sports, but the rest is completely, yeah. Or technique heavy sport, yeah, exactly. So one thing where I think people get a bit confused is that they look at like weightlifting or strength training. You need progressive overload to make your muscles grow. But then they think like, well, I need progressive overload in the speed department as well. So they have to be like, yeah, I should almost, you should pick to failure. 2 reps in reserve. No, you shouldn't, because it's not the same thing. This stuff, this is a skill. It's not strength, right? It's a skill that you develop. This is kind of like, I'm working on my swing instead, right? And I'm not a golfer, but I've talked to a lot of students throughout the years that have been golfers, and they've all said the same. Like, well, my instructor always said, like, break the swing down in stages, and you practice each one very slowly. And that's how you learn something, or you teach your brain what you want to do. You can't just like, oh, okay, I'm just going to swing this club and then go for it. No, that's not, how you do it when you want to learn an actual, physical skill. So I think that's where the disconnect is when it comes to how you approach it with like, or how, if you look at it like, oh, progressive overloads, you're not building muscle here. And actually saw a great classical guitar player, and he would practice this slow. Preparing everything, right? And he played incredible things. And he said that what's holding people back is not, physical speed, because we all have that. It's the timing of it, like how to controlling it. And that's where the slow practice comes in. And I think where a lot of people get confused is like, they see it as like lifting an empty barbell. Like, oh, what's this gonna do? But it's not the same. You're teaching your brain exactly what you want it to do. And even though if the motion will change when you speed it up a little bit, as long as it doesn't wildly change, you will develop your technique so much faster by doing it this way. But it also takes a lot of patience, because a lot of people who come from like this Petrucci raising the metronome method, they think like, okay, so I want to get up to here. Where's the camera? Here. And then I got to kind of here by just, redlining it, and it's sloppy, but, I'm kind of close. And then they ask me for advice, and I'm like, no. You need to be practicing here. And then they feel like, what the fuck? This gap got even bigger now. But the thing is, as Tom Quayle said, and 6 months, he said, we did, just exercises, not even worrying about speed at all, just slow practice. And as after X amount of reps, your brain will get this, and then your speed gains will be much bigger, and it will sound great as well, because you don't have all this bullshit. Hold on, I know I sound like one of those fuckers who just waste hours playing Fast with no control, but I'm not just trying to get this to the same level as the rest of my playing. Yeah, but what tempo do you practice at, Juan? And be very honest. And how much have you done that? Have you actually done the schedule in the book every day and done it at like eighth notes at 80? And can go even slower. I say that tempo a lot, but that's because that's sort of the max tempo I do when I practice anything, because I want to be able to control everything when I practice, right? So I don't want to just play it. I want to make sure that I get all this, what I call finger choreography when I prepare the next finger like that. And especially for pentatonic, that makes a big difference, because you have less time on each string. So it's super important to do that. And also it takes way longer than people want. That's another thing. And that's again why I'm so pissed off at all these douchebags that sell courses were like, oh, learn to shred in 21 days, or 30, or even YouTube videos when you see like 60 BPMs and then 200 BPMs in like 30 days. This fucking bullshit. Or maybe, no, actually maybe it's true, but it's gonna sound like ass. You're not gonna go from 60 BPMs doing that and then getting to 200 and be like super clean in 30 days. That's impossible. That won't happen. That's like you, I don't know, shaving off like 5 seconds of your 100-meter sprint or something. That's way too fast, Juan. Six, that's basically like, okay, 16 note triplets at that tempo. I'm gonna check, so let's say seconds are here, right? So that's around this tempo. That's way too fast. What I'm saying is more like eighth notes, 2 notes per beat at 80 BPMs max. Because this is a thing where, like I said before, like what's your slow? And you're not unusual in any regard here, Juan, because a lot of people think like, well, that is slow, but it's not when you use 6 notes per beat. And I've tried this for myself, and I found like, even if I can, I can easily do it at that tempo. And it's clean, but that's not gonna help my technique as much as me going. Focus on transition time and everything like absolutely perfect. So that's the thing that can confuse people as well. And whatever you're doing at like, but and that's the thing, Juan. So in the pentatonic picking power book, and I think I mentioned it in the intro, but I don't think a lot of people read that. You need to, if I write out an exercise, if I have something like, I will write that out in 16 note triplets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because that's the most logical way of seeing that pattern. But that doesn't mean you have to practice it like that. You can practice anything just going eighth notes. So you don't need to go down to, so your metronome, I don't care if it only goes down to 80, you can still do, it could go down to 150 as the lowest metronome setting, which would be a bit weird, a weird metronome, but then you do quarter notes. So that's what I'm talking about speed-wise. So don't do, if you do that, and assuming you don't have anything weird going on with your right hand, or picking hand, or left hand, it's impossible for you not to improve. Thing is, like, if you do this, as an example, if you do this at this tempo, five hours a day for 6 months, right? Let's say you were fucking crazy enough to do that. I'm not saying you should, but it's a thought experiment. Do you think that you're not allowed to play anything else? You can't try doing that when you're done practicing. You only do the slow reps, but perfect, focusing on transition time, or the finger choreography, relaxation, good tone, and everything. If you did that for 5 hours a day for 6 months, do you or do you not believe you could actually go faster without even trying, or even have tried or pushed to speed? For me, that's a no-brainer that of course you would be able to do that. And no, that's not the same as like, well, if you lift this, empty barbell for, 5 hours a day, and then for 6 months, and then at the 6 month mark, you try to go for like 300 pounds. No, that's not the same, because we're not building muscle, we're building coordination. So don't get those things crossed. And again, I'm not saying that you should practice this thing for 5 hours. You probably will get focal dystonia if you do that, which you don't want. But as a thought experiment, right? So you need a shit ton of reps. That's it. Well, then you're good. So it will just take you longer than you want, unfortunately. But that's the cool thing about music and guitar. You kind of have to earn everything. Or like going to the gym as well, right? I don't care if you're Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or whoever. You have to do the work. You can't have your minions doing it for you. So if you want that skill, or you want to become fitter or whatever, you need to put in the work. So it's a very sort of democratic endeavor in that regard. And also, I'm not saying that like, oh, it's only my way that works, blah, blah, blah. If someone's watching this and be like, well, this actually worked for me because blah, blah, I've done it this way and this works. Great, keep doing that. But if you had trouble before and you haven't had success, just try it this way and see what happens. You have nothing to lose if you haven't succeeded so far. Because there's nothing worse than putting in time on something and it doesn't work, so. Yeah, but that's the thing, Juan. I mean, you can work really hard on your golf swing as well, but if you do it incorrectly, it's not gonna work. And I'm not talking about, my incorrect here is not how you pick per se. It's more about focusing on the perfect synchronization, being relaxed, and getting a good tone and all that stuff. So you just teaching your brain what the hell you want it to do, right? So it takes time to do this. So again, that's why it's so frustrating to see these fucking clickbait titles of courses and shit. And that also gives, actual legit courses and videos a bad name, because like, oh, I tried this and it didn't really work. And worst of all, it gives people the impression that, develop your technique. It just takes, a couple of months, and then you're like a master. No, that doesn't work. So yeah. Exactly, Seb. Get rich in 30 days and get slim in 20 days and get fast in 2 weeks. Translates to give me your money. Exactly. But I think, most people, well, maybe not, but I think a lot of people have learned that, you can't really get a six-pack you can't promise someone a six-pack in 6 weeks when we don't know what the starting point they have and all that stuff. It's ridiculous, right? But for guitar, if you don't know, you don't know. And if you see a lot of YouTube videos and you see, some legit guys say this stuff, it's hurting the whole thing. It's such a bummer, because people start doubting themselves. They're like, well, I did so-and-so get super, become a super shredder in 5 weeks course, and I'm not a super shredder. It must be something wrong with me, because, look at all the testimonials. So it's a shit show, basically. And I believe anyone who's done those things and be like, yeah, this is awesome, look at me, I went from nothing to shred god. I don't think they're actually listening to their own playing. There's a reason why you read those things about it. So when I started playing in the early 90s, there was nothing like this. No one would have bought this shit, because it's such bullshit. And we all knew that, because we you know, you kind of read interviews with like Ingve and Petrucci and Vai and Vinnie Moore and all those guys, and all of them were like, well, you know, oh, I practice 8 hours a day for 5 years. Do you understand how much time that is? And I'm not saying you need to do that to get a good technique. You can get that on way less time if you practice correctly and you're more focused. But in general, how these guys developed their playing so quickly was because they put in a shitload of time, and that's just the way that's just how it works. So I think that should be there. Like, no, we have a lot of things that eludes us. So I get that point. Anyway, so any more questions? Otherwise, I'm about done with this stream. Hopefully the picked up helped somewhat. But you can never go wrong if you focus on accuracy and getting good reps in, and again making sure you're not doing something crazy with your right hand that's clearly not going to work, because that can be a trap of slow practice. Because you can basically, if you want to play, you can do, but that will obviously have a very low speed ceiling, right? So you want to make sure that whatever you're doing is gonna work at a higher speed. And a great way to do that is to just try, just do a sort of a low-key speed burst here. So I'm not even going full blast here, but you just want to find what motion is gonna work for you going through one rep like that, for example. And then try to keep that motion somewhat consistent when you practice slowly. Thanks, James. This will probably have a separate, I will cut that part out and make a separate video. And then I'm gonna get comments from the TikTok crowd like, you talk too much. It's like, yeah, I'm trying to teach you something, you dumbass. All right, guys, have a great weekend, and